In the last video, we did a little bit of setup in our application, and now we're ready to start learning about navigation. To get started with navigation, we're going to install a dependency called React Router. We're going to first install this dependency from our terminal, and then we'll very quickly start talking about exactly what it does. At my terminal, I'm going to stop my running server with Control-C, and then I will install React Router with npm install --save react router DOM. Now this is really important. Make sure you get the -DOM on there. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to go through the installation process. And while that's going, I first want to tell you a little bit about why we just installed something called React Router DOM as opposed to something called React Router, which you might have expected. All right, so quick diagram over here. So inside of the React Router family of libraries, there's a couple of different dependencies that you could possibly install. Now, you will very commonly make a typo, or at least I do. I very frequently, personally, always accidentally install the React Router library. But it turns out we never actually want to install React Router by itself. The React Router library, as it is published on npm, is the core library of everything inside of the React Router general project. So this library right here has some core navigation logic inside of it. It decides how to work with React, how to change content out depending upon some different rules, and some other low-level logic. To get an actual implementation of React Router that works inside of specifically the browser, we install the package React Router DOM, and that's what we just installed 2 seconds ago. So anytime that you want to use React Router on a project to handle navigation, as we are about to do, you're always going to be installing this project called React Router DOM, and you are not going to install React Router. Now, just so you know, there are some other very similarly named projects that you might think that you need as well. There's another one called React Router Native. This is a routing library for use inside of React Native projects. In our case, for what we're doing inside this course, we are making web applications. So we make use of React Router DOM. We are not making native mobile apps. React Router Native right here is for native mobile applications. So it's not appropriate for anything that we are doing inside the browser. If you are making an application that's going to run inside the browser, you always want React Router DOM as opposed to React Native. You usually don't want React Native unless you really know you do. Now finally, there's one other package that you might really think is relevant to what we're doing. It is called React Router Redux. This is a library that is very similar to the React Redux library that we've been using in our past few applications. It is essentially a compatibility layer to get React Router and Redux to play along with each other very nicely. Now in this course, you and I are not going to make use of React Router Redux, so we are not going to use this library right here. It is 100% not necessary, and in general, I personally recommend that you do not use it. In fact, even the authors of React Router themselves inside the official documentation do not recommend that you try to keep track of stuff inside of Redux related to navigation. So this is more of a, if you really think you need it, you can go and try it, but in general, it's better to just kind of even ignore that it exists. Okay, so I'm going to flip back over to my terminal. It looks like I successfully installed React Router DOM. So I'm going to start my project back up with npm start. And then after I get that back up, I'm going to flip back over to my code editor. Then at the top of this file, I'm going to import a couple of different properties or different things from this React Router DOM library. So underneath my import React, I'll say import browser router and route from React Router DOM. Now this is another thing to keep in mind here. Make sure that you're putting React Router DOM here. I can guarantee you, almost without a doubt, that at some point inside this application, you're going to accidentally type React Router. But in every case for this application, we are always going to write out React Router DOM. Now normally, as you well know from going through a lot of content in this course, usually I explain things with a ton of diagrams, but React Router is actually one instance where it is so much easier to just show you a quick example to help you understand exactly how it works. So we're just going to very quickly write up a quick example with React Router DOM to help you get a better sense of what's going on. All right, to get started with this quick little example, we're going to write some code into this file that we're going to delete very quickly once we get a better idea of how this thing is behaving. So up above my app component, I'm going to make two other kind of dummy little components, just like stand-in things. So inside of my file, I'm going to say const page1 is going to be a functional component that returns a div with the text page1. And then I'm going to copy paste that down. And then for the second copy, I'm going to change it to say page2 instead, like so. Then inside of my app component, I'm going to turn this into a multi-line JSX block. Inside of the div, I'm going to place an instance of this browser router right here. Browser router is an actual React component. We'll talk about exactly what it is doing in just a moment, but like I said, it's a lot easier to show than to explain in this particular case. So inside this div right here, I'm going to place browser router. And then inside of there, I'm going to put a route. On the route, I'm going to pass in a prop that says path / like so inside of a string. After that, I'll put in the keyword exact on its own. No assignment here, so we're not going to say exact equals something or anything like that. I'm just going to put the word exact. And then finally, I'll say component. I'll put down my curly braces to indicate that I want to reference a JavaScript variable inside of some JSX. And I'm going to put in there page 1, like so. And then after that, I'm going to put another route. For this one, I'm going to say /page2. I'm not going to put the exact keyword this time. And I'll put in just component page 2. And I'll close off that tag as well. All right, so we now have a browser router. We have 2 routes, we have 2 paths, we have 1 exact, and 2 components like so. So I'm now going to save this, and we're going to flip back over to the browser, and we're just going to see what happens. After we observe some interesting behavior, we'll have a long discussion to talk about exactly how React Router is working behind the scenes for us and what it's going to really do inside of our project. All right. So I'm going to flip back over. Oops, I made a little mistake. I forgot one little element here. So inside of the browser router, I'm going to wrap both those routes with the div like so. My mistake. Wow, I kind of broke the flow here, but we'll fix that up really quickly. So I'm going to save that and then flip back over. Okay, so now successfully, without any error message, I see page 1 appear on the screen. And now, very interestingly, I'm going to change my address bar up here. I'm going to go to localhost :3000 / page 2, like so. And now I see the text page 2 appear on the screen. Now, just to make things a little bit more interesting than this, I'm going to go up to my page 2 component. And I'll put, say, a button tag inside of here that says something like click me, like so. And I'll save that, and we'll flip back over. And now I see on page 2, I see that button. But if I go back to just localhost 3000, I still see that page 1 component appear. Okay, so what we see here is a very simple example of what React Router is doing. And so I think that you can kind of understand, based upon the URL, we are seeing some different content on the screen. So let's take a pause right here. When we come back in the next video, we're going to break down this little example into its little component parts, so to speak, and we'll talk about what React Router is doing for us. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.